At dinner in front of everyone. My mom lifted her glass, smiled at me, and announced, "We're passing the cottage his parents gave you over to your sister." The kind of line that slices through a room without raising its volume. Chloe laughed, tossing out, "Relax. It's just a cottage." Like she was doing me a favor. Guests froze. My groom didn't. He watched her with a look I'd never seen before. People say families fall apart in private. They're wrong. Mine began to unravel right there between the clinking glasses and the sentence my groom was about to say next. My name is Lucy, and I grew up in a family where love was measured by how much you could give without breaking. From the outside, we looked polished holiday photos lined perfectly on the mantel, matching outfits for every Thanksgiving. My mother, Evelyn's voice, always smooth and confident as she told friends how blessed we were. But inside there was a current you learned to navigate early. A quiet rulebook no one wrote, but everyone followed. Chloe shines. Lucy manages. I was the child who learned to make myself small, so the family machine ran smoothly. When we were little, Chloe always wanted the bigger bedroom, because my friends will come over more. Evelyn agreed immediately. Dad, Thomas nodded. I didn't argue. I helped her move into the room that smelled like fresh paint while I took the one with the humming vent and the view of the back fence. They said I was strong, responsible, mature. Words that sounded like compliments until I realized they really meant you won't fight back. That dynamic didn't dissolve as we became adults. It sharpened. Chloe drifted from job to job, relationship to relationship. Always certain someone would catch her, and someone always did. Usually me. I loaned her money she never repaid. I covered bills she forgot. I listened to her cry over choices she made, then watched her walk away when I needed even an ounce of the support I'd given. Still, I tried to keep the peace. That's what families do, right? That's what daughters with strong shoulders do. But things shifted when I met Evan. Evan saw me. Not the version of me my mother preferred, the polite, reliable daughter who absorbed shock after shock without complaint, but the real me. He asked about my job, my projects, my dreams, and he listened like my answers mattered for the first time. I felt like someone wasn't expecting me to hold up an entire world. When his parents, the Hales, gifted us the cottage as a wedding present, a small white house tucked on a quiet street in Seattle, it felt like the first foundation I'd ever been handed instead of forced to build alone. It wasn't just a place to live. It was safety, independence, our beginning. And maybe that's why my mother couldn't stand it. In the weeks leading up to the rehearsal dinner, she grew interested, too interested, asking questions about the cottage, whether it would stay in the family, whether Chloe would have access to it during a transitional phase. I ignored the unease curling in my stomach. I wanted to believe she was curious, not calculating, but deep down, I knew my mother. Evelyn never touched anything without a plan. And when she saw something she wanted, especially something meant for me, she had a way of reaching for it with a smile so warm you didn't notice the cold behind it. Still, nothing prepared me for the moment at the dinner table when she stood, lifted her glass, and took something that wasn't hers to take. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to feel like a celebration, but from the moment I walked into the ballroom, something felt tilted like the floor was level, but the room wasn't. The chandeliers glowed too brightly. The clinking of silverware sounded too sharp. And every smile from my mother looked stretched just a bit too thin, as if she'd spent hours practicing it in the mirror. Chloe was already at the center table, laughing louder than necessary, her hand fluttering dramatically as she told some story about how life was just so chaotic lately. People leaned in sympathetically. She always knew how to paint herself as fragile. I took my seat beside Evan, and the second I did, Chloe's eyes flicked to me quick, assessing like she was checking whether her performance was landing. "Rough day?" she asked, voice dipped in sugar. I forced a small smile. "I'm good." Her grin widened like she knew something I didn't. "Well, you will be." The comment lodged in my chest, unsettling and vague before I could respond. My mother swept in, placing a manicured hand on Chloe's shoulder with theatrical affection. "Sweetheart, everything's going to work out beautifully," she said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. It was a performance. I didn't know the script yet, but they clearly did throughout dinner. The tension grew in subtle jabs wrapped as politeness. Evelyn complimented the Hales on their generosity to the whole family, emphasizing the last 3 words with a brightness that made my stomach coil. Chloe repeated more than once how she just needed a stable place to get back on her feet. Each time my parents nodded sympathetically, each time more guests overheard. It was a setup, and I hadn't realized I'd already been cast. My father barely looked at me. He kept sipping his drink, eyes darting to Evelyn as if waiting for cues. The Hales seemed puzzled, whispering to each other, watching the dynamic play out with growing confusion. Evan stayed close, hand occasionally brushing mine under the table, grounding me without saying a word. Then dessert was served, and something shifted inside me like the air thickened just before a storm breaks. Evelyn stood, smoothed the front of her dress, and tapped her glass. That smile, the one that never reached her eyes, twisted up her face as she began her little speech, but before the words left her mouth, before the chandelier light caught the rim of her glass, before she dropped the sentence that would crack the night open, I saw it. Chloe leaned back in her chair and smirked. It wasn't a kind smile. It wasn't nervous. It wasn't grateful. It was the look of someone who had already won. And suddenly, pieces began fitting together: the questions about the cottage, the sudden interest from my mother, the sympathetic murmurs directed toward Chloe throughout the night. This wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't thoughtless. It was choreographed. Still, nothing prepared me for the sound of my sister's laugh after my mother made her announcement. "Hi, delighted. Rehearsed. Relax," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "It's just a cottage. Just a cottage." As if the future I fought for, the boundary I finally built, the stability I never had, was nothing more than a spare object for her convenience. In that moment, the humiliation burned hotter than anger. And beneath it, something older, something I'd carried for years, finally cracked open. This wasn't them being inconsiderate. This was them taking and expecting me to thank them for it. The applause after my mother's announcement faded, but the ringing in my ears didn't. It felt like the room had tilted sharply, like all the air gathered in one corner and left me standing in a vacuum. People whispered, eyes darting between Chloe and me, gauging my reaction like it was part of the entertainment. I didn't say anything. And that silence, the same silence they'd mistaken as obedience, my whole life, spread across the table like a calm surface, hiding a deep current. Evan leaned in, voice low. "Lucy, look at me." I did. His expression wasn't shocked. It was steady, deliberate. The look of someone who had been waiting to see whether I wanted to run or fight. "You don't owe them a scene," he whispered. "You owe yourself the truth." That landed somewhere deep. My mother took my silence as permission and kept talking, describing Chloe's transition period and how family supports family. Chloe nodded along, playing her part perfectly innocent, overwhelmed. Oh, so grateful for this sudden twist of generosity. She even dabbed the corner of her eyes, pretending to get emotional. I excused myself before I suffocated. The hallway outside the ballroom was dimmer, cooler. My hands shook as I pressed them against the wall, grounding myself. After a moment, Evan joined me. He didn't touch me. He waited, giving me space to choose. When I finally spoke, my voice came out thin. "They planned this." He nodded once. No hesitation. "I know." And then, almost on cue, my phone buzzed. Normally, I would have ignored it. But something made me look, maybe instinct, maybe 30 years of knowing how my family moved when they wanted something. It was a preview of a group message, a thread I didn't recognize at first. Then my stomach dropped. I remembered I had been added months ago for an event. I'd never muted the thread. The preview showed just a fragment, Evelyn's name at the top. "Make sure she feels guilty tonight." My breath stalled. I opened the messages. What waited inside felt like stepping into a room and realizing the lights were off because someone didn't want you to see what was happening. There were instructions. Actual instructions. Lines from Evelyn telling Chloe what tone to use, when to laugh, when to pretend to be overwhelmed, how to sway the guests, notes about painting the cottage as a community family asset, wording designed to manipulate the Hales' kindness, and the clearest sentence in the entire thread, "Lucy won't refuse in public. She never does." The words hit harder than the announcement itself, Not because they were cruel, but because they were true, or they had been. Evan exhaled beside me, seeing the screen. So, this wasn't thoughtless, he murmured. It was deliberate. My throat tightened. They think I'm still that girl. He looked at me then, eyes sharp with a quiet fire. Then show them you're not for a long moment. I didn't speak. I let the weight of the messages settle. Not as chains, but as clarity. The humiliation, the setup, the entitlement. None of it was accidental. They had built a script, expected me to follow it, and believed I'd fall in line the way I always had. But something inside me had shifted the moment I saw Chloe smirk. By the time we walked back toward the ballroom, my steps were steady, my breathing calm. I wasn't walking into a trap anymore. I was walking toward the truth. When we stepped back into the ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations were flatter, glances sharper, the kind of hush that forms when people sense something is about to happen, but don't know what. Evelyn was mid-sentence, still riding the high of her announcement. Chloe at her side, glowing with practiced gratitude. They didn't see us re-enter. Didn't notice the resolve that had carved itself into my posture, but Evan did. He squeezed my hand once, not to steady me, but to anchor the moment. I returned to my seat with quiet precision. My mother looked over, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face at my disappearance, but she brightened quickly, voice sickeningly sweet. Lucy, honey, are you all right? Your sister is overwhelmed with gratitude. This is such a beautiful family moment. Family moment. The word soured on my tongue. I set my phone on the table, not hidden, not displayed, just present. A quiet threat they hadn't recognized yet. Chloe leaned forward, eyes glistening with faux sincerity. I mean it, Lucy. This cottage will change everything for me. I don't know what I'd do without you. She said it like she was reading from a script, which technically she was. My groom just looked at her and said, this time, Evan didn't wait for a cue. His chair scraped softly as he straightened. Actually, Lucy and I need to clarify something right now. Evelyn froze mid-smile. There's nothing to clarify, dear. There is, he said. A lot, actually. The firmness in his voice rippled across the table. Guests shifted, sensing heat beneath the surface. My father frowned, already uncomfortable, already preparing to side with whichever version of the story made his life easiest. I lifted my chin. Mom. Chloe, the cottage isn't available. Chloe's brows shot up. What are you talking about? You just heard Mom. It's a done deal. No, I said calmly. It isn't. Evelyn narrowed her eyes, her posture sharpening. Lucy, don't embarrass yourself. Or us. The decision has been made. By who? I asked softly. Because it wasn't me. Her lips pinched. It doesn't need to be you. We're your family. We decide things together. That was the moment the room shifted. Not loudly, but decisively. A collective lean in. A crack in the mask Evelyn wore. I reached for my phone, tapped the screen, and slid it slightly toward her. Before you decided, you might have wanted to check the terms of the trust agreement Mr. and Mrs. Hale placed the cottage under. Mrs. Hale's eyebrows lifted. Mr. Hale folded his napkin deliberately, watching Evelyn with cool, assessing eyes. They hadn't been informed of any passing down. The property, I continued, cannot be cohabited, lent or assigned to any non-spousal individual. It's protected as a foundational asset for our marriage. Violating that clause would trigger reversion. Evelyn blinked once, twice. The smile dropped. You're making this up. I read the agreement, I replied, voice steady, every word. A ripple of murmurs fluttered across the room. My father bristled. Why would they put such a ridiculous restriction? Mr. Hale cut him off to ensure our gift wasn't misappropriated. A simple sentence, a surgical incision. Evelyn palled. Chloe, however, wasn't finished with her performance. She inhaled sharply, summoning tears. I can't believe you do this, she whispered. In front of everyone. You're humiliating me. You humiliated yourself, I said quietly. The moment you agreed to follow Mom's plan, her tearful expression faltered. Evelyn's eyes snapped toward her. What plan? Here we were. I tapped my phone again and opened the group messages, the ones I'd been accidentally left in months ago, The ones detailing exactly how they intended to push me, corner me, shame me into compliance. Gasps floated across the table as I began reading aloud. Make sure she feels guilty tonight. Cry if you need to. People should see you as vulnerable. She won't refuse in public. She never does. We need to frame the cottage as a family asset she'll fold if others agree. Each sentence landed like a stone in a still pond. No one breathed. Even the waitstaff froze. Chloe's tears dried instantly, her face draining of color. Lucy, stop. This is out of context. Do you want me to read the rest? I asked. She had no answer. Then Evelyn lunged for dignity, for control. This is absurd. You invaded our private messages. You sent them to me, I said simply. You didn't remove me from the thread. A few guests choked back shocked laughs. Evelyn seethed, glancing around desperately for an ally. There were none. Mr. Hale stood slowly. Evelyn, this was deceitful. You manipulated our gift and attempted to coerce your daughter into surrendering something that wasn't yours. Evelyn's voice cracked. I was trying to help Chloe. She needs stability. So does Lucy. Mrs. Hale said gently, but firmly. And she doesn't exploit people to get it. Evan's hand found mine under the table. Lucy, you don't owe them anything, he murmured. My mother's composure finally shattered. This is what you want, she hissed. To make your own mother look like a villain on the eve of your wedding. I didn't make you look like anything, I said. I just stopped protecting the image you wanted everyone to believe. A single sentence, but it broke something in her. Her breath quickened. Her hands trembled. You're ungrateful, she spat. After everything I've done, I gave you life. And this is how you repay me, by siding with strangers. Strangers didn't teach me that love is a transaction. I replied softly. You did. She recoiled like I'd struck her. Chloe's whisper cracked. So the cottage gone. It was never yours. Evan said, and it never will be. The room had gone silent, not heavy, but decisive, like a verdict had been delivered. One by one, guests stood, not dramatically, not angrily, just with quiet disapproval. And as they left, the truth settled around Evelyn and Chloe like dust after a collapse. This wasn't just a confrontation. This was exposure. Evelyn's final attempt at power flickered out right there under the chandelier lights. She sank into her chair, unable to meet my eyes, unable to rebuild the illusion she'd spent years constructing. For the first time in my life, I didn't try to comfort her. I didn't absorb the blame. I didn't manage the emotions filling the room. I simply stood Evan beside me and walked away, and behind us. My mother's world built on control, guilt, and entitlement finally cracked open. The next morning, the house felt unnaturally still, like the quiet after a long storm finally gives the walls permission to rest. Sunlight slipped through the blinds in soft strips, landing on the floorboards of the living room where I stood barefoot, holding a mug Evan had made for me. It tasted different, calmer, real. By 10, a locksmith arrived. I watched the old keys drop into my palm metal pieces that had once meant family. Now nothing more than artifacts of a past I no longer owed myself to carry. When he handed me the new set, something inside me settled. A door wasn't just changed. A cycle was after he left. I blocked my mother's number, then my father's, then Chloe's. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, just certainty, like crossing off an account that had been overdrawn for years. I forwarded the messages and a brief summary to the Hale family's attorney. Exactly as they'd asked, not out of revenge, but out of protection. My protection. Evan found me standing in the doorway, the morning light warming my shoulders. How do you feel? He asked. I took a breath. Steady, clean, like the house finally belongs to us, I said. 6 months later, as we rolled fresh paint onto the cottage walls, I realized something even deeper. It wasn't the cottage that changed my life. It was choosing who I allowed to cross the threshold. Standing in that finished cottage months later, I understood something I wish I'd learned sooner. Family isn't defined by who shares your blood, but by who respects your boundaries. Walking away wasn't betrayal. It was survival. And choosing myself didn't break my family. It simply revealed the truth about it. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from the inside out, tell me your story in the comments.